All right, so today we're going to talk in this panel a little bit about how to move from this sort of sci-fi, cool, deep tech technology into actually building these deep tech companies. What kind of specific challenges do we see in terms of growing a deep tech startup in order to meet maybe VC returns and VC exit horizons? And how can you also be lean as a deep tech startup? So this is the topic for today's panel, and we're going to start by you guys introducing yourself. And I'll start quickly and just say that my name's Rebecka, and I'm an investment manager at Industrifonden, and super excited to have this panel. So tell me what your name is and what your relationship is to building deep tech startups. Do you want to start, Aline? Yeah.
So my name is Aline, and I'm a scientist and the founder of YOGUT. At YOGUT, we are developing an innovative solution and science-based to deliver functional ingredients through foods. So we're creating a smart device which enables the production of personalized functional foods on demand to modulate the gut microbiome.
Hi, I'm Jussi Sainiemi. I'm from Voima Ventures, just joined the team a couple of weeks ago. Before that, I was 8 years with Finnish Industry Investment, or TESI, and dealing with technological and deep tech investments.
Ulric, Ljungblad, you saw our product. I have a PhD in physics from Gothenburg University. I worked for 10 years in the semiconductor industry in a company here in Stockholm, Micronic Laser Systems, and then 10 years in the 3D printing industry before we started the Freemelt 3 years ago.
Great. It's great to have you all here. And we're going to dive into the first topic, which is relating to how you can be lean as a hardware company, for example, or as a deep tech company. And I'm used to, working a lot with software companies or even consumer products, and it's quite easy to iterate when you're that kind of company. But how do you iterate as a deep tech or maybe even a hardware company? And I wanted to ask you, Ulric, to start on this topic, because I know you've actually been able to do this with your massive 3D printer. How did you do that?
So I mean, like I said in my talk, we are addressing quite a small market for 3D printing. It's research, it's R&D. We sell to universities, but also to R&D departments in larger companies with our first product, and that means that we can, we don't need to have that kind of reliability in a system that you require in a manufacturing environment. There are other demands that are maybe even higher when it comes to peak performance. But a researcher really wants to have, I was a PhD student myself. Maybe you want 4 good experiments in 4 years in order to write a thesis. I mean, it's a completely different set of demands in the research arena. And that makes it possible for us to develop our products, these kind of products that we have chosen then as our first primary goal, together with our customers in a way that is not very hostile, sort of. It's a very friendly environment because they want to improve the system, we want to improve the system. So for us, this is an area where we can start and work in a way that makes it possible to iterate quickly, sort of.
Mm. And what about you, Aline? Because you've been able to iterate a bit as well, because you're both doing research and have a startup with a consumer product. So can you tell us a little bit how you've been, developing your product with your consumers?
Yes, because it almost feels that lean and the deep tech cannot go hand in hand. And mostly because a lot of the deep tech products are developed through academia, like focusing more in the development of the technology instead of looking into user application case. And that's something that we have been keeping in mind from the beginning. From at the YOGUT, I started by interacting directly with the consumers, understanding which kind of products we could develop based on the technology that we were developing. And so the first step was the interaction, and then we understanding the market possibilities. Then we started designing the application.
And what about Jussi? Do you have any good examples in your portfolio with companies being able to sort of iterate their way through in designing a deep tech product or a deep tech?
Yeah, maybe very sort of practical tip is to try to collaborate with others. And for instance, many of the deep tech companies are requiring quite a lot of equipment, which are typically very expensive. So if you have partners, if you have research institutes or others who you can collaborate with and use the equipment as long as you are sort of have validated your product, or so that you can avoid as much overdoing development, which is in the end of the day not needed. So maybe that's very practical. But obviously these are also kind of case-by-case related issues. So there is not a one single thing which could then suit for everyone.
And if you want to iterate and you find these early innovators or research departments at universities or whatever wanting to use and test your product, how do you make sure you don't get stuck there? I'm thinking of an old book, I think it's from the 90s, talking about crossing the chasm. And I see this a lot in deep tech companies, that they get stuck with a sort of the innovation departments at a big company, or they get stuck with pilots or proof of concept. So if you might want them in the beginning to be able to be lean, but how do you move past the early adopters to the early majority? And any advice you can give, maybe to Aline then, that still learn to, so.
It's very important to educate your consumers about the technology that we are developing, since it's something that perhaps they haven't really seen. Like, for instance, we are developing this device that is no similar product in the market today. So we have to kind of educate them and somehow integrate them into the product development. That's so good.
Have you been able to do this, Ulric, move beyond sort of the early adopters and early innovators?
Well, we are approaching that point when we are about to take that leap. It's an extremely interesting point to be trying to do that. I mean, what we did was that we formulated a business plan that was really a two-step plan. In order to develop our technology in a sort of friendly environment that made it possible to develop fast and also create business early, we chose to do this in this research setup, sort of. But already from the beginning, the goal has been to move this technology into manufacturing. But this is a very much bigger project for us. And I would say that today we've reached a point. We are now close to 20 employees, and we have developed our own electron beam technology, which has been directed towards later applications for manufacturing. So I think it's good to think about this already from the start. What are you going to do in a couple of years, and direct the initial development and also initial interaction with the market towards your long-term goals, sort of.
Are you seeing this a lot with companies that you meet as well, Jussi?
Yeah, one of the, coming from Finland, obviously one of the local success stories has been Supercell. Obviously they are not in deep tech, but they have this concept of failing fast. And I think it's very important also in deep tech to fail fast, and how you do that is to collaborate with customers as early as possible and get the feedback from them. And make sure that what you are developing is actually something that the market is needing.
Good point. I wanted to move into a topic in relation to how to raise capital as a deep tech company, and it would be nice to hear all your sort of different perspectives. You managed to, Ulric, and you're obviously investing in deep tech, and you're about to raise capital for us. So it'd be nice to hear both what questions you might have and what sort of advice you might have to give, Jussi. Do you want to start, Jussi, what specific things you're looking for in deep tech companies?
Yeah, sure. So basically, as already a little bit discussed, I think it's very important that when you see deep tech teams, they are very often having a bunch of doctors, and it's very important that to get the commercial side into the team, and also sometimes the founders get very excited about the solution, but it might be a little bit unclear what is the thing they are actually solving, and it's very important to try to have the commercial side as early on in the team and in your plan to make sure that it's something which also is interesting for the investor's point of view.
Do you meet a lot of ex-scientists that are good entrepreneurs?
Maybe not a lot, but sometimes obviously.
Careful
but yeah. But obviously we are dealing with quite much with teams which are very much sort of research based, and they typically don't have that much of experience from the commercial side, and so that's where the sort of cross-functional teams comes very handy.
And Ulric, why do you think you were able to raise capital from VCs?
A lot of luck, maybe, but I mean, raising capital was something new for all of us. So we were 6 founders, and so one really learns a lot by starting a company and a lot of new things. But we had long experience. I mean, some from research long time ago, but then we have been working in company in environment where you need to think about the customer and profit and cash flow and so on. So that was maybe good for us, but starting to talk to investors and trying to understand how to attract investors, I think what we realized very quickly was that at least this is my perception of it, is that they look at 2 things more than anything else. One thing is a team. Will this team manage the task, but also will they work together in a good way? I think this was something that many emphasized when we talked about this. And the other thing is scalability. Is the product scalable, and in which way, and how do you present that in the business plan? Scalability was extremely important.
Cool. And another challenge that I interviewed a little bit my colleague Morten, one of the founders of Tobii, and I asked him what were sort of the main challenges early on as a startup within hardware and deep tech. And he said, well, one of the big challenges was building relationship with suppliers of very specific parts were almost as important as sort of pitching to VCs to raise capital. And how do you manage to do that as quite a small startup with no, leverage, and still you need these parts to build your own product? And I guess for you, Aline, it must be you're dealing with, very sensitive microbiotics, and for you, Ulric, you probably need as well very specific parts. So what sort of learnings do you have in terms of building those necessary supplier relationships to be able to build your product?
I mean, for me, we have been thinking about large-scale manufacturing from day one. So, and also developing close relationship with our suppliers and including people in the team that has this experience also with large-scale manufacturing. That's the way to minimize future problems that we might have when scaling up our solution.
Absolutely. I mean, the relationship with the suppliers is extremely important. And we also were a few on the team that had experience with suppliers, but still, I mean, in our machine there's quite a lot of parts. So we source from many different suppliers, and it differs very much depending on if it's a standard product, of course, or if it's something special, custom made. And the vacuum system is never standard. It's made by drawings and you order somewhere. Our first supplier of the main vacuum chamber was a company from England, and they for the second chamber they raised the price by 80%. So I mean, you encounter these kind of things when you don't buy off-the-shelf products, and so you have to work a lot with finding a supplier that can work with you and that believes that you will grow and that can see a greater business opportunity in the future.
And sort of from the financial perspective, how do you manage your working capital when you're dependent on so many hardware parts and you have to plan your production, but not usable your working capital in making sure you have a storage of all your vital parts? How do you? What's your recommendation to companies on how to manage their working capital?
Yeah, it's a very sort of fine line how to do with that, and obviously, as we know, if you're dealing with a very large kind of component manufacturers, they're typically using sort of small companies as their banks, and it's very difficult to agree on payment terms which are attractive from the startup point of view, and that's where your sort of recommendation comes very kind of useful to try to collaborate with maybe a little bit smaller players who are ready to take a little bit more risk on you and believe that if they sort of are investing on you, that might be then for them very beneficial in the long run. So that's obviously one thing, and then obviously when companies are raising capital, it's very important to, when you are in a business which is sort of capital incentive, so intensive, so your plans are also taking into account that you need to have certain inventories, you need to have those components in the inventory in order to be able to deliver anything, and so that's also from the planning perspective very, very important.
I can add and confirm what you say, that we have found suppliers that where we can, maybe even as we are this small, that where we are maybe 5 to 10% of their turnover, which means that we actually mean something for them. And that's not only in the parts, it's also in, for instance, the software consultants that we work with and so on. We work with smaller companies that see that they really can benefit in a way that really matches for their turnover. Sort of.
So really fund the ones that believe in your potential and your vision and your growth. Same as when you're looking for investors. Yeah.
And I think they think they can grow with us in some way. So it becomes strategic in some way.
Nice. It'd be nice to hear a little bit in the end your sort of do's and don'ts as a deep tech startup. What's the extra things you need to think about and do and not do? So if you want to go around.
Really talk to your customers. Try to understand what they actually want before you start developing it.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Yeah, exactly, and I think it's very important that you don't try to develop your product kind of too long without getting any feedback from the market, and discussing with your customers, discussing with investors and all relevant sort of parties around. I think it's always very, very valuable for the company to understand what are the requirements and the context and sort of relevant players in the field. So you need to be out there. You shouldn't kind of stay in your development lab and think that you have all the wisdom there. So go out there and learn.
Also, I agree with both of you that despite we have to focus on developing our technology, we should avoid not become a solution looking for a problem afterwards. So having a good communication with the market, and also in my case, as an early stage, to look for investors that are interested in the kind of business that I'm building, because there are not so many out there, and if they don't understand the challenges of building a deep tech startup that has a little bit longer product cycles and so on, it might be challenging. So.
I guess at the same time, if you're launching a truly innovative sort of deep tech company, your customers might not know that they need it yet. So you almost have to sort of create a new market and educate your customers. And I guess that can be quite challenging. But if you manage to do it, you might create a whole new market and be truly transformative. And creating a new category within something.
Yeah. Sometimes you need to be a preacher as well in addition to founder, and you need to have different qualities. And it's just like you said, that sometimes if you really have a disruptive product, and it's a completely new market, it obviously needs education, and why that is needed. It might not be obvious for all.
I would say it would be much more challenging if there isn't a market. I mean, then you're you're walking in the dark more or less when it comes to the market. And I just want to add also that it's not only the product actually, it's the offering of, for instance, service contracts in our case varies dramatically between if we sell to a university or if we sell to R&D department in a large company. The large companies really want service contracts, while the universities really don't want it because they have very big problems raising money for service contracts, much easier for the system. So one really have to think about the business model also for different kind of customers, because that really matters a lot.
Maybe something to add is also when we were discussing about deep tech companies, obviously intellectual property is very important, and I think you need to be you need to understand where the value in the company is sort of created, whether it's in the IP or whether it is in the business. Obviously, it's not black and white; it's typically both. But still, you need to understand where the sort of the value is created, and that's also part of the story when you're discussing with investors and other stakeholders.
Yeah, good point. All right, thank you so much, all of you. Hope you all got some good tips. Thank you.